Welcome back, YouTube, to Peterson Auto. Today we're putting our 14-inch dual disc clutch into the DT360's flywheel housing, well, clutch housing. Just so you know, clutch housing or flywheel housing, and the one on the transmission back there, which you can barely see behind the bumper, is going to be your bell housing. So you have clutch housings on SAE 2, 3, etc. What you're going to need is your big old pressure plate, clutch disc 1, mid plate, clutch disc 2, input shaft from the transmission, or one of those fancy alignment tools. Remember, heavy duty stuff does not come with anything. So when I pulled the input shaft out of the transmission. That's the common way of doing this, because you never have all the alignment tools laying around. You just pull the input shaft. Eaton pullers are stupid easy to pull. This is your bearing retainer here. You can see that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 bolts in it. Pulled those 6 bolts, tapped it a couple times with a rubber mallet. The whole assembly fell out. That bearing retainer goes right up against here. Then you just put it all back together with a new gasket. You can either tap one out or, you know, buy one. I'm not sure which yet, but I will need a new gasket. You're also going to need wrench, ratchet, socket, whatever. I'm using a ratchet with an extension and a 9/16 socket, 6-point. Always use 6-point when you can. And pile of bolts. So these bolts are 1.25 3/8 16, if I recall. Grade 8 bolts, grade 8. See all the 6 marks on the top? That means grade 8. So we're going to go ahead and get those because you're going to need them. I also have some 1.5 here, so we're going to see what length we need and go from there. So all this crap has to go on there. Caveat, warning, these things are obnoxiously heavy. It's nice to have a helper, really nice. I'm not that fortunate, so I'm putting it in myself. I'm going to be probably supporting it in some unorthodox methods, and we'll see how that goes. But hopefully you'll get an idea how to do it on your own. Okay, YouTube, this is usually done from under the vehicle, which means you have really horrible lighting and all that stuff. Since I have this fancy cab, not here in this case, you know, we're going to do it now. So, one thing I want to mention, this bearing is an NKIS 30 needle roller bearing, not a typical pilot bearing. So when you take the, oh man, that thing's heavy, input shaft, and you look, there's a little bushing on the end. That's the inner roller of the bearing. You want to go ahead and get that all set up in there, nice and honky-dory. There you go. Now, that bearing is supporting that right now, and it'll support my clutch disc until I get everything bolted in too. So there's no play in there. Spins and rolls free. Really nice setup. I like it. It's going to work out really well. NKIS 30 if you're trying to put a DT360 flywheel with a 2-inch 10 spline, 1.054 diameter pilot input bearing on there. So that's the one you'll be wanting to use. I'm no bearing expert by any means, but I talked to some. One was the guy at Philadelphia Ball Bearing, and then there's 2 more internet companies I called to, you know, confirm function and everything. They said, yeah, the temperatures and loads you're seeing, shouldn't be any problems with that bearing at all. Put some grease in it, you'll be good. So, you know, that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to test it out and see exactly how well it works when this whole project's done. But right now, we're just putting a clutch in. So, out comes the input shaft, and first thing first is our clutch disc. Like I said, everything's heavy, so you can see right there's a sticker that says flywheel side. Okay, that goes on your flywheel. So that's your first thing you got to remember. So same with brake rotors and everything else, is these come coated in oil. I put a little extra coat on it actually. So you want to take your brake clean. I like the red cans. Red cans will kill you. It's heavier than air, so, you know, don't use this in a pit or anything like that, but as long as you have decent ventilation or you're not using enough to fill your entire room, you're good. I'm in the garage with the door closed right now, and I have no concerns about killing myself. Give it a good hose down. And you can go ahead and take a second or two, let that air out. I might get some paper towels and wipe it off here. So we'll get back once that air's out. Okay, YouTube, it's pretty well aired out. Just wiped it down some. You can see the last remnants fading. You can see it's now nice and clean. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our center plate labeled flywheel side, line that flywheel side up, take our input shaft, put it through the disc, and then we're going to line everything up with the pilot bearing. Work that pilot bearing in. Slide your pressure plate up against. Next step is your mid plate. Your mid plate now has a couple of sides to it, obviously. The one with the indent, let's see, yeah, there we go, with the indent is going to go up against your flywheel. The one that's fairly flat is going to go out against. Again, you got to put some brake clean on this, so that's our next step. Okay, YouTube, I actually just turned on another light for you. I don't know if you'll notice that or not, but we have our mid plate here, and I have just cleaned it off. Next step is to get that in place. I'm going to grab 2 bolts without the lock washers, actually, and have them ready, because they're what I'm going to use to hold everything in place. And actually, I will need the longer ones, it looks like. But we can use the shorter ones I had just to hold things in place. So, one more thing. Looks like it's easier to do now. There are cardboard shims in here that you have to remove. 1, 2, that one's gone, 3, and 4. These cardboard shims are just for shipping purposes. You have this wonderful tag here. It says remove cardboard shims before installation. So, you know, listen to your tags. They actually make these things almost idiot proof, which is kind of not very surprising at all, just by what's going on and what they have there. I have these big bolts here. These are like 3-4 inches long. I'm going to use them as alignment bolts more than anything. Remember, the orientation of the packs does not matter. There should be enough heft here. It's going to be 2 independent systems. So we're going to use actually these long bolts just to get it oriented and started. I'm going to get that one up in. Put that up against. There we go. And get that lined up enough to get a couple threads in there. So that is not working near as well as I was expecting it to. There we go, that one's going good. Okay, so there's one lined up. I can lift up on this and get 2 lined up. So that's just lined up roughly where it goes. Just to give you an idea, make sure that's going to fit fine. Next step is obviously plate 2 and pressure plate. Those are the heavy buggers. So my way of doing that is going to involve putting in some of these smaller bolts on the bottom and hoping that holds the mid plate in place well enough, at least, that I can get everything lined back up. So we're going to put 2 or 3 of these in the bottom. It looks like we're probably going to go with 3. These are going in probably a couple threads. You know, enough to be functional, but not enough to make any major difference there, other than just alignment. So we're not tightening them down you'll see there's still going to be a good bit of play, good bit of movement. See, that one didn't even get tightened down yet. Okay. I guess that one's starting to bite. Just getting hard access with my fingers, so we're just going to run it in a few threads. There we go. So now that's not really tight, but it's held in place. And when I pull these big bolts out, ideally it should not go anywhere. Theories. Theories, YouTube, theories. And the theory works. Hopefully if we're right. I'm not. I was hoping that would hold my center disc in place too. Looks like that's not going to happen. So take a little more of a brake clean. Couple spots. And over now fairly dirty towel. I'm going to try to find the cleaner spot. And just hit that up, make sure we get every surface covered. There we go. Every surface is covered. That's currently in the drying process. I'll pull this input shaft and let everything pull. Which is not the intended way of doing this, but hey. Okay. Now if you have the specialty alignment tool, it makes it a lot easier. I don't. So I'm going to have to manhandle the pressure plate, the input shaft, and the rear disc all at the same time. So I'm going to have to get that set up for you here, YouTube, so I can get that put in. Quick tidbit for you, YouTube. You can see right there it clearly says pressure plate side. Like I said, they're clearly labeled, makes it fairly easy. That part goes, that label goes towards the pressure plate, which I'm putting on now, but we're doing that out of frame. I'll show you the assembly then. Alright YouTube, so now out of frame I have this obnoxiously large assembly with the pressure plate, the input shaft, and the rear disc. I'm going to pull this down, show it to you really quick. Hopefully that was enough of a view. I'm going to slide it in. Weeble wobble till we get everything lined up. Whew. Like I said, YouTube, this thing is pretty heavy. So right now, I'm having issues with lining it up because that clutch disc needs to move up. As you can hear, I'm breathing heavy even. So, I'm gonna catch my breath while I stare at this clutch disc. That nicely does say made in USA. So yeah, the Lincoln Auto Truck clutch seems to be made in USA. Kind of nice. Okay. Now I'm able to breathe again. We're going to put this input shaft into here. This input shaft here into here. Lift it up and hopefully it moves up and then wants to move back down. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Well, plan didn't work out as planned, but the input shaft fell in. Now remember, this is the hard part. Getting the tranny in is pretty easy. Because when you're putting the transmission in, you really don't have to worry about 3/4 of this stuff. Because it's already lined up. That's why you have the input shaft out right here. Okay. Okay, that one's in a good at least 5 or 6 threads. Go over here and do the same thing. Okay, that's going to locate it good enough for government work. So now I got to go ahead and pull it out just a little bit. Get those bolts I put down in the bottom out. And then go ahead and get everything bolted back together. So that's our next plan. We're going to see how well that works out. There we go. So now that's out. Come here. There are slightly longer bolts with our lock washers. So these are the 1.5 inch, as I had discussed earlier. And we're going to need all 1.5 inch of that. Now, right now, I'm just tapping to try to get things to slide in a little better because that input shaft's not 100% friendly. You know, it's a little bit dirty and whatnot. So this is just making it go along that route. And I think that's ready.
Yeah, apparently that one's not going right yet. It's right over here.
Nope, that one not yet either. So they make really awesome jack stand, actually hydraulic jacks just for this purpose. Well, I don't have the need for one or a good enough reason to buy one, actually own one. So I'm here with my knee, putting everything in place. There we go. Now that's where it needs to be. As I said, you're going to have some play until you get these tightened down. So you're going to need to find the hole, and I think I found the hole. You need to get everything threaded in. No, I didn't find it yet. Tell you, YouTube, this thing is pretty pain in the rear to line everything up in. So that one there went in. So that means this hole's just got to be slightly off. So this is all a game of see which way you can move it to get things to line up. Hold it in place just properly and, you know, hope you're right. really kind of an annoying game, to be 100% honest with you, YouTube. So it looks like I'm going to put them in, most likely going to put them in without. Yeah, there we go. Put them in without the lock washers, and then pull them back out with, once you get them all in, pull them back out and put the lock washers back on them one at a time. Now you can see everything starting to snug down. So we got those two. Now we're going to go ahead. We're going to get a couple of the bottom ones in place if we can. And right there should work. Now you can see me starting bolts with the ratchet here. That's really just for access. I'm being very careful that I'm not stripping anything and I'm not missing anything there as far as you know, getting any threads cross-threaded or anything like that. I'm putting very, very little pressure on the actual ratchet. Just enough to get it to do what I need it to do. Okay, that one should be going in soon. Hopefully I can do this with my knee here. Might just be a little harder access for me right now. Again, this is a numbers game more than anything. You're just trying to, you know, get what you can started to get the other bolts in. So a lot of the time it helps if you work around in a circular pattern. Just make sure you do your final tightening in a crisscross pattern. There we go, so that's got me a little more room. I could have used longer bolts, made this a little easier on myself, but these actually look like they're going to go just far enough into the flywheel. So these bolts are going to work out, you know, perfect without going out the back of the flywheel. Whereas a longer bolt would go out the back of the flywheel a good bit and cause issues there. So the problem I'm running into is I have to start them by hand, because I can't push on them lightly to get the threads to, you know, start sinking into each other with the socket, because the socket will bottom out on the pressure plate. So once I get started by hand, looks like I can then run it in. Now, hopefully that's what we're keeping as the plan. Okay, so I got one in here, yeah, and then what, two in on that side. So now we can get the top ones undone. One at a time, obviously. Okay, so that one's in there, getting good, getting started. And I'm just putting them in so I know they're in a couple threads, just enough to keep everything located. Depends how good or bad this goes. There is few locating tricks you can use. So that one's not quite long enough. You can always, once you get a good cross pattern of 4-in, you can always make some adjustments here and there to make everything work. You know, tighten this one, loosen that one, and that can go ahead and get you a little more room if you need it. There we go. So that's getting me a lot more clearance on that second bolt. Okay, there we go, YouTube. We're getting there. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got, I think we have 6 or 8 bolts. I'll have to check it. We got most of the bolts started now. We got at least 4 of them, which is at least half. And here comes the 5th. So like I said, working in that circular pattern makes it noticeably easier. That allows you to get everything set up just right. So I'm going to try one of these smaller bolts. Yeah, I'm not there yet. So at this point, YouTube, I need to find more bolts. But one more tip for you while you're doing this. You notice me pushing up on the input shaft with my knee. That was pretty much just moving the input shaft. You kind of want to jiggle everything a little bit as you're tightening it down. That helps keep everything lined up without binding. So a little pressure up or down on it is enough to give up that, you know, thousandths or 2,000ths of an inch of play back in at the pilot bearing, and you know, keep everything lined up so you can slide it in nice and easy. Now I'm going to find 2 more bolts. Okay, YouTube, we got all these bolts snugged up now. Per Eaton Fuller, torque spec is 30 to 35 foot-pounds. You can see this little shim now comes out. Once you have everything permanently down, take the shim out, toss that aside. You don't need that. Input shaft, a couple jiggles or light taps with a rubber mallet. We'll loosen everything up, get it into place, and then you can start tightening it down. So that's our next step. We're going to go ahead and get that done. Okay, YouTube, we have our torque wrench. It's set for 35 foot-pounds. Pick one. There's your click. You want to go diagonally across to the other one. There's your click. Now, a little tip for you is you can go ahead and get your paint pen or Sharpie and mark which ones you've done. So I got my Sharpie here. Mark that one and that one. And we're going to continue. And then we went there, top, okay, bottom here. So that one's good. We just had to click, mark. We're going to go across to the top left in this case because we're bottom right. There's your click. Mark. Now we're going to go back over here to our first side. Get that socket on there. there's our click. We're barely getting any click out of this, so you probably can't hear that, but you'll feel it. And there's the mark. There's our click. There's our mark. There's our click. There's our mark. There we go. There's our click, and there's our mark, which we'll put on in a second. Another thing you can do, sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, really depends on the situation. This case, I'm really not caring much about it. But you can mark your bolts in a specific manner. In something like a flywheel here, you mark it going crossways, like that. You mark each one with a full head across for a mark in the same manner. And then when you go back later to check it, if you do have an issue, you know, if that one's sitting that way, you know, up and down, or maybe if you can see it like I have the other mark on this one, if it's sitting in that direction, then you know something's moved. Now, in my case, I would loosen it up and retighten it anyway. It doesn't matter, but race cars actually, we're working on a race car, I always do that, because the diagnosis of the problems is as important as fixing the problem in a lot of cases. You want to know why that problem was happening and what caused it. You know, with something like this, I'm going to chalk it up if it does loosen up to, you know, obviously not being tight enough. Well, nothing we can do there. So, just a couple little tips for you there. We got those bolts all tightened down, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step here. Okay, now we have everything tightened out. We have a rubber mallet here. The spinny part there is your bearing. This geary part is your gear. Yeah, the geary part's your gear. Ideally, you're tapping lightly. Anything works. But a few light taps is all you need. I'd try not to hit the bearing. There's a little play in the gears you can see. So, you know, if you need to get a block of wood and hit the actual shaft, that'd be best. After a few taps, should be able to wiggle your input shaft out. Now, your clutch is basically installed. All you have to do is there's a grease fitting up top here. You got to go ahead and get that piece out, put the grease fitting in, and then you're pretty much ready to install your transmission at that point in time. One more thing I want to cover, and yes, it is frame. This says bearing must be lubricated. That is actually referring to this, which is your throw-out bearing. As you can see, it'll move as you push on it and such. There's a little red cap here. In the top of it, that's what you pull out and put your grease fitting in. So I may do that on camera, I may do that off camera. That's a very easy step. Over here is your adjuster. So you loosen this bolt and you move the teeth in or out, and it's going to give you adjustment. There's plenty of videos of that on YouTube showing how to do it. There are the 15.5 clutches versus the 14-inch, the 15.5 clutches. these pins in here that you can kind of see will line up with this hole. You're supposed to tap the pin into the flywheel. This setup does not use it. Some of them do. Some of the 14-inch clutches do with the twin discs also. This particular one relies on the bolts. It says grade 5 or better, 3/8/16. I did confirm that, so you need 3/8/16, grade 5 or better, 2 1/4 inch. So actually the short ones I got were correct. If I recall, I'll have to measure them actually. But I use the long ones. I don't have any issues on the backside. I've already confirmed that with the long ones we're not going to have any issues on the backside. We got about 1 inch of clearance, so 2.5 ain't going to hurt. If I remember here, I also put a link to all the Eaton literature for these in my description, so you'll have it and you can reference it yourself. It goes through in detail how to check the run out of the flywheel housing. I didn't bother because this has not been off this engine since I've owned it. It was in a running driving vehicle. It was set at factory, so if it was set at factory and it was good at factory, I'm assuming I'm not getting better than that. It's good. So that's one step that I didn't do here, didn't cover here. But you're not going to, in all reality, you're not going to do that step unless you are in one of those situations where you did have the flywheel housing off. So, you know, one of those things in technical data, you should do it. However, in actual practice, it's almost never done. So we're going to get this grease fitting in. Go ahead and get the rest of these bolts pulled out of here and maybe try to maneuver the engine crane around and the transmission around. Maybe we'll get lucky enough to get a transmission put in place for you today, YouTube. We'll see how it goes. So, you know, put your grease fitting in and you're going to be good to go. Just, it's the only thing I forgot here. We're going to get that off camera. If you have any questions or concerns, you know, please leave a comment. I'll be glad to explain the process, what I'm doing, and how it all works. And glad to, you know, glad to answer any questions there. Make sure you like. Make sure you subscribe. Subscriptions are going to let you know when I do the next crazy thing on this truck, like, you know, put in a 14-inch clutch, twin disc 14-inch clutch, and a 7-speed Eaton Fuller behind a DT360 in a pickup truck. So, you know, we're going to get all that done. And we're going to go ahead and get you some more videos. So like, comment, and subscribe, YouTube. Thank you for watching.